Of course, right now, the capacity is still small, but given time, they will rise.
Ahmed, maybe we can start our meeting.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So, dear colleague, first of all, I would like, on behalf of you, to a recent position as a board member, as board chairman of the Malaysian Academy of Science till a few days ago, but he's still fellow of Academy of Science. He also worked deeply on how to introduce science and innovation in Malaysia. So this is a sort of forward-looking. So for this free region, I think, at least for this free region, it will be very interesting to hear the presentation and the input from Dr. Azzman. But I'm sure, of course, we will have a great question both from members, but also certainly also from Facebook. As you know, we are also on Facebook. Thank you very much, and the floor is you for Dr. Azzman.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Your Excellency, Mr. Chairman, the Special Commission for the Development Model, distinguished members of the Commission, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good morning. I am greatly honored to be invited to make this presentation and thank the Special Commission for this kind privilege. I will try to summarize what Malaysia has attempted to do over almost 3 decades of sustained effort to address knowledge-based development. Many strategic initiatives have been initiated, not all of which can be presented in a brief talk. It is also difficult for several other reasons. The rise of knowledge marks a major change in human society. The way it is organized, its primary economic and social objectives, its primary activities and functions, and in particular, how value is produced, consumed, and regenerated. Social and economic transformation enabled by knowledge in general and science and technology in particular is a complex transition program that needs deep analysis, which is beyond the scope of this discussion. Let me start my presentation. So I hope you can see the slide. Can I get confirmation that you are able to see?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet. Let's just wait a few seconds. Is it there yet?
Nope.
No, not yet.
Can I try again? Try again. Is it there now?
Unfortunately not.
Not, okay. This is Murphy's Law. We tried it yesterday. This is slide share. Can I help?
That's Microsoft problem, not yours.
Let me try one third time. So, Mrs. Ehsan, if you are there, can you tell us anything that's wrong?
You can send it to Madam
Or
Ihsan.
maybe
You can send it to her, and she will share it. Yes.
Yeah.
If you see the icon near the microphone on the top right side, and then you just click on the file, it should work. But then we're happy to back you up, of course.
It's the same. Sorry. Okay. Which microphone?
So the rectangle close to the microphone on the top right hand side.
On the right hand side. Okay. I have to open share tray. All right. Okay.
Yes.
I've done that. Now I go to the presentation, right? And then share it.
The presentation should be on your desk.
Yep. This is the fourth time. Is it coming through?
No.
No.
Maybe Hassan should share the slide and we go ahead. So that's maybe, yeah. Hassan.
Okay. Let me just try one last time. Okay. This is share tray is open. Ihsan.
Yes, then you just have to click on the presentation on the share thread, so
Okay.
it loads on.
Yeah, okay. So I will do that now. Sorry, I'm getting lost with
We didn't get it.
the documents. Let me try one more time.
That's fine. Otherwise, I'm happy to share it.
Let me try one more time. Okay. Okay. This is the last time. Hopefully, it will work. Right. Is that coming through now?
No.
No, but
Still no.
I suggest that Ihsan share the file. That's maybe yeah.
All right. So that may be the better way. Let me then go back.
Go ahead
Yes.
then.
Yeah. All right. So Ihsan, are you able to bring up the slide?
It is there, Azzman.
Okay. I'm not. Yes. Now I see. Okay. Thank you. There are 6 parts to my presentation. Can you move to the next slide, please? Next slide. Yeah. There are 6 parts to the presentation, but they can be categorized into 3 parts, actually. First, we address Malaysia's development philosophy and planning methodology. Second, we present some of the seminal strategic initiatives that have been planned and implemented. And finally, we present a critical analysis of our current status in terms of achievements, outcomes, and challenges. We will end with some observations on how we may be moving forward. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes. Okay, we will look at the Rukun Negara, or the translation is National Principles. This was proclaimed in 1970, 13 years after independence from the British colonization. Clearly, our forefathers had a clear vision to establish a values-based, democratic, and just society, which is progressive, capable of making use of modern science and technology. The idea of a moral and ethical society is further elaborated in the Vision 2020 speech. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yes. This was a speech given by the Prime Minister then, Dr. Mahathir, in 1991, where the notion of a developed society is clearly described and gained wide public support. The 9 challenges in Vision 2020 renders. Can you keep the previous slide on? The previous one, yes. Just keep that for a while. The 9 challenges of the Vision 2020 renders in some detail what he asserted are the essential qualities of a developed society. In particular, he stressed that the most important resource of a nation is a set of talents, skills, creativity, and will of its people. This fundamental idea forms a strong basis for knowledge-based development. Next slide, please. We will go briefly into Malaysia's development planning process. Next, please, yes. Malaysia adopted centralized development planning from the 1960s. 11 5-year plans have been produced, with the 12th plan due next year, 2021 to 2025. These plans may be seen as 4 developmental phases, beginning with agriculture base between 1957, that's independence, to 1980, then manufacturing base, 1981 to 2000, innovation-based 2001 to 2020, and now humanization-based from 2021 onwards. The Shared Prosperity Vision 2021 to 2030, which was announced last year, is an early and key example of reorientation of development plannings towards addressing critical human needs and concerns, where sustainability issues are mainstreamed. Next, please. Let's move quickly into what we mean by knowledge-based development. Next. Knowledge-based development is not a new idea. We quote here from Drucker's 1969 book, The Age of Discontinuity, where he anticipated many of the events that have come to pass. Knowledge is now the central factor of production, where knowledge applications create new industries through the forces of entrepreneurship and innovation. Bear in mind that Drucker's words were written when the internet did not exist. Next, please. The question is often posed whether knowledge-based development is post-industrial or advanced industrial. In my mind, it can be either, depending on the context and how one wishes to frame the challenge. In either case, we will have a knowledge economy where the product is primarily knowledge, as well as a knowledge-based economy where the product can be anything where the knowledge intensity is determines the value of the product. Thereby, a knowledge-based economy touches on all economic sectors. A knowledge society that arises, which is organized around the development, distribution, acquisition, application, and sharing of knowledge, will then become prominent. ICT comes to the forefront as the key enabler of knowledge in the digital transformation of human society. Malaysia's National IT Council was established in 1994 under the chairmanship of the Prime Minister then. It was immediately realized that the internet and IT in general were about to make a huge impact on the country's development. Next, please. In this slide, very old one, we use it in the council to explain some of the events taking place. Here we see human society as undergoing a continuing process of change and development from the primitive to the post-industrial stage, with each stage moving to the next through the infusion of more advanced information and knowledge as key factors of value creation and transformation. The Council also saw an opportunity to leapfrog from the industrial stage in place then to the post-industrial society, thus reducing the need to invest heavily to build a mature industrial model. Next, please. Next. The Council conceived of two complementary strategic initiatives as essential. First, a program to initiate economic development, which became known as the Multimedia Super Corridor, or MSC. And second, a program to nurture social development, which became the National IT Agenda, or NITA. Next, please. Yes, now we speak about the Multimedia Super Corridor to jumpstart the knowledge economy. The genesis of the MSC was a presentation in 1994 indicating that the country could not achieve the Vision 2020 target of sustained 7% growth per year for the next 30 years. The analysis highlighted that for such growth to become possible, the economic structure then existing would demand more labor, land, and capital than could be supplied. On the other hand, by shifting our focus towards high value-added IT-based industries through what was then called the multimedia utopia, we could possibly surpass the 2020 growth target. You can see the three lines in three colors. The green one is the likely outcome of current approach. The Vision 2020 was the projection, and the blue one is the multimedia utopia. Next, please. The basic idea of the MSc is shown in slide 15 here as a virtuous circle known among systems engineers as a positive feedback loop. The initiation phase is the creation of an ideal environment for world-class companies to use as a global hub. These companies create value from information age business, thereby promoting the creation of company clusters comprising global and local companies. Together, they produce innovative ways and means to enhance productivity. When this happens, more and more companies are attracted to the MSc, success breeds even more success, and the cycle continues, finding a life of its own. It was anticipated that from a modest local beginning, we could become a global player. Next, please. The government earmarked an area, you can see that on the right on the screen, an area of about 15 by 50 kilometers to develop an intelligent city. That was the name we used at the time. Now it's called a smart city. The city was called Cyberjaya. The word Jaya means success, so Cyberjaya means cyber success. Adjacent to the new government administrative center, which is called now Putrajaya. Putra is the name of the first prime minister, so Putrajaya, Putra the success. It was designed to kickstart a content and applications industry in order to circumvent the anticipated plateauing of the manufacturing center. So this is actually represented on the left of the screen as two S-curves. We anticipated present improvements in manufacturing and production to plateau. So we needed to kickstart a new S-curve, what we call future innovations. Let's move on to slide 17. Yes, now we move to the social transformation aspect, the complementary program to the MSc that was meant to deal with social transformation. Next, please. Sorry, can you keep it here? I want to just speak a little bit. Social transformation was addressed by NITA. The tagline, turning ripples into tidal waves, played on the metaphor of water as a source of the renewal and rejuvenation. Small seed projects were seen as ripples that could harness inherent forces in social and economic interaction to produce resonating waves of increasingly powerful change to be enjoyed by all. Next, please. In this slide, we show the conceptual pyramid of NITA, where comprehensive human development of the people forms the apex, at the peak there, with the supporting base comprising of infrastructure as the information age foundation, and content and applications as the solutions for work and life. Three challenges link the three elements. First, in linking people and infrastructure, the challenge is to achieve access and equity. Second, between people and content and applications, the challenge is to initiate a qualitative transformation of society. Third, between infrastructure and content and applications, the challenge is to create value. Finally, if we successfully meet these challenges collectively, we would come within reach of the values-based developed society as suggested in Vision 2020. Next slide, please. Yes. Now we go into the achievements and outcomes of the program. Let's start. Next slide. In this slide, we summarize the reception of citizens to the personal use of digital technologies. You can see the numbers are very impressive. We have 32.7 million population, 90.1% internet penetration, 20.9 million smartphone users, 85% of the population using online banking, etc., etc. I won't go through all the details, but these are very interesting numbers that shows progress at the human personal level. Next, please. For the next 5 slides, I'm showing statistics compiled by the Department of Statistics of Malaysia, which show the current progress. Actually, the numbers are from 2015 to 2019, over 5 years. I will just talk about the 2019, just to show the latest number. I will do this very, very quickly. In 21, that's slide 21, that's sorry, 20, right? Sorry, in 21, this one, the ICT industry contributed 289.2 billion, or 19.1% to the economy. Remember that we were almost nothing about 30 years ago, almost nothing. To provide context, 4 ringgit Malaysia is $1 US. Let's go to slide 22, please. Yeah. 22 shows the gross value added with the highest contributions from ICT services at 43.5% and ICT manufacturing at 33.7%, with a total contribution of value added at 195.3 billion. Next slide, please. Slide 23 shows the value added for the e-commerce industry, which stands at 127 billion. 24, please, next slide. 24 shows the ICT industry and other industries that produce ICT products, which in total is 210.2 billion. And we have the last one, 25. Number 25 is actually the total employment in the ICT industry, which in 2019 stands at 1.14 million people. All areas are undergoing rapid rates of growth, which when compounded will produce very high gains in a very short time. So this is what we could call success. So ladies and gentlemen, with so much that we have achieved, should we be satisfied? And the answer to me is not yet. So let's see why not yet. Can we move on, please? Next slide. Here, the section 5 will speak about the challenges that we continue to face. Next, please. This is a slide with a lot of information that I will not be able to describe in total. Let me just say that it is a reality check that focuses on innovation and its driving factors. What emerges is a land of contradictions. That's what we are right now, full of paradoxes. The iceberg signifies what we normally see at the top, but frequently fail to notice, lurking under the waves. From the Global Innovation Index, GII 2019, Malaysia is ranked 35 out of 129 countries overall, but 130 out of 137 countries under the Product Innovation sub-pillar of the Global Entrepreneurship Index 2018. So this is one of the contradictions. For the knowledge ranking, the country's researchers have produced more than 120,000 publications since 2013, of which 39 are considered high-impact publications. But we ranked 71 out of 129 in the knowledge creation sub-pillar of the same GII. Other rankings shown here highlight the fact that Malaysia is a relatively large global trader, but a poor participant in global value chains. Now, what's happening here? The country also has a good talent pool, but weak startup skills, all shown in this particular slide. Next slide, please. In a 2017 study by the Economic Planning Unit, industries were mapped according to their knowledge content versus the percentage of innovators for each industry. They could be categorized as pace setters at the top and moving progressively down to adapters, imitators, and laggards. Several industries emerged as pace setters, such as ICT services, electrical and electronics, and chemical, petroleum, and pharmaceuticals. At the bottom end, we have some surprises as laggards. Agriculture is a big industry involving strong players. Health services can be considered fairly advanced, given the fact that health tourism is a large and expanding industry. So again, what's going on? A partial explanation is that the innovation ecosystems for the innovators arose by chance and were not built by design. Thus, most industries remain as users and consumers of technology and have not managed to become producers that are capable of creating value from knowledge. Next slide, please. In this slide, we provide further evidence why we may have a weak innovation capacity. The country spends much of its research funds on basic and applied research, allocating only 14.6% to experimental development. This contrasts with more than 63% going to experimental development in countries such as Japan and Korea. In the next slide, please. Yes. In slide 30, we make a similar comparison for the proportion of researchers in business in Malaysia, which stands at 21.94%, as opposed to higher education, which is 71.37%. In Japan and Korea, respectively,
Next slide,
Sorry? Yes, you have to move the slide. Slide 30, is it? Okay. This is slide 30. Let me repeat. We make a similar comparison for the proportion of researchers in business in Malaysia, which is 21.94%, as opposed to higher education, which is 71.37%. In Japan and Korea, the proportion of researchers in business is 73.75% and 81.33% respectively. So the proportions you can see very clearly in these graphics, lopsided. Let's move on. Number 31, please. The innovation story is well summarized in slide 31, where we observe that Korea and Taiwan, who were once Malaysia's peers, pulling ahead as early as 4 decades ago. It needs to be stressed that both Korea and Taiwan are poor in natural resources. However, they are good at making use of what we all have, which is our people. Malaysia remains a leading country among a small group of Southeast Asian countries that have become mired in the so-called middle income trap. The reasons behind this relative difference lies squarely on the capacity to create value and innovate and to apply knowledge for development. Next slide, please. I would like to close this section on challenges by showing the country profiles for Malaysia and Morocco produced by the World Economic Forum. This is not meant to be a comparison between the two countries. Each has its own strengths and weaknesses and confront different sets of challenges. We need to understand each on its own merits. Taking Malaysia first, which is ranked at 27 out of 141 countries, we note that it does well in institutions, product market, labor market, financial system, and business dynamism, where the ranking for each of these elements is higher than the overall rank. However, in key areas that are important for innovation, such as innovation capacity, infrastructure, and ICT adoption, its score is still below overall ranking. A similar analysis, let's move on to the next slide now for Morocco. Yes, similar analysis of Morocco shows the following. It is strong in institutions, infrastructure, macroeconomic stability, product market, financial system, market size, and business dynamism. The weakest links in the chain appear to be innovation capacity itself and ICT adoption. These observations provide a good start on how to think about the desired development model. So, ladies and gentlemen, Malaysia continues on its journey towards knowledge-based development, perhaps with greater resolve and clarity of purpose. Yes, next slide, please. Several significant policy documents are being formulated, with some already in place. The list provided here is only indicative of what is being seen as critical areas to focus on. Just to mention, I'm a member of the Academy of Sciences. We produced a foresight report in 2017. There is a national policy on Industry 4 produced by MITI. We have a shared prosperity vision 2030 that I mentioned earlier, announced last year, Ministry of Economic Affairs. My academy has also produced a Science, Technology and Innovation Master Plan. And the 12th Malaysia Plan, of course, is due next year, produced by Ministry of Economic Affairs. Let's move on. A better appreciation of what innovation means for business and society and how to build better ecosystems for them should produce much better results in the future. So this is the last slide. In moving forward, we can summarize the key factors for success as follows. Develop and adopt widely a knowledge-based model for sustainable growth and development. It is not sufficient to be adopters of technology at the surface level. Transformation to the knowledge-based model implies a process of learning, unlearning, and relearning among all members of society. When we mention unlearning, we have to unlearn the past lessons of how to deal with, say, industrialized production. The future is no longer the same kind of system. It is based on knowledge. It is no longer a factory. Next, we have to initiate a structural transformation of the same page, please. We have to initiate a structural transformation of economy and society. We have to move away from the industrial model, which is a huge challenge if a country is heavily invested in it. Instead of industrial factories, the new organizing principles revolve around knowledge and its applications. However, evidence suggests that it could be done, and in some countries, done very rapidly. The third point, mindset and behavioral change among the people. We are talking here about human values and attitudes that may lead to cultural and civilizational rejuvenation enabled by knowledge. Fourth, innovation ecosystems to capitalize on all knowledge without ignoring our own rich heritage of indigenous knowledge for life-changing economic and social development. And finally, good planning must be followed by excellent implementation. It is better to have a good plan that is well executed than to have a fantastic grand plan that is poorly executed. With that, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Azzman. I think you provide us with a long journey in Malaysia development. And without further ado, I will open the floor for questions. I think I have already two of them from colleague, Professor Fouad Laroui from Amsterdam, and then Rashid Garawi, Professor Garawi from Switzerland. Fouad.
Thank you very much, and thank you. Have other questions from Rita and Shakib Ben Musa, etc. Anyway, I'm sorry, but I found this presentation absolutely fascinating and very interesting, and I will leave my colleagues to ask more economic and questions. I have a question on language, because it has been interesting me since years. Language is very important in education and development. And we have an ongoing debate on this problem. So, Mr. Azzman, I've put my question on the chat. I will just read it. when I was selling OCP's phosphate in Malaysia like years ago, I took an interest in the local language, your beautiful Bahasa Malaysia.
Yes. Bahasa Malaysia.
Yeah, I tried to learn it. There's like 20% of the words are Arabic words anyway. But I discovered something fascinating. By law, Malaysian language is written with the Latin alphabet, and you call it Rumi. However, the Arabic alphabet, Jawi, is also used. And I discovered that Rumi is official, and efforts are made to preserve Jawi, Arabic. So, yes, it's interesting for us too. Rumi, the Latin alphabet, is the most commonly used script, official and informal purpose. This way, I think you have absorbed all technical and scientific English words, French words, German words very easily because you write it the same way in Rumi. So my question is, does this compromise to have Rumi and Jawi together, but to use Rumi for science, does this compromise help Malaysia to bring scientific and technical knowledge to all its people, not only an elite, but to all the people and all its social classes? I find it a very interesting compromise, and I'm very interesting to hear what you say about that. Thank you very much again for this very interesting presentation.
So, Professor Bonford, should we answer each question or we proceed?
Yes, I think this is what usually we do. So, question by question. Thank you.
Let me try to address the question. It's a very big question, like very large question. In fact, the debate continues until today. For example, when the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir was in office, he promoted the teaching of science and technology in English. He believes that English will be a better language for many practical reasons, including the fact that most of scientific literature is in English. But there's another view to it. The other view is that the local language can be better at explaining scientific phenomena. And this is where you bring in the Islamic culture, Arabic, Jawi, because the phenomena that are being explained by science sometimes can be understood better if we have a larger worldview, if I call it that. So by using only English, it may be limiting in a sense. So that continues until today, by the way. So I don't have a grand answer to your question. What we do is actually mix and match. We have become adept at using different language in different contexts. The school children, they have to struggle at the beginning to handle both. For example, lately, in the last couple of decades, the standard of English has dropped in all the schools, and we are trying to bring it back. The causes of this drop are still not well understood, but of course, one clear reason is that most of the teaching for the certain subjects are done in local language. So this is where I think we have to find a balance, to strike a balance between different kinds of knowledge with different kinds of languages to use for them. But I want to touch a little bit on this, your observation, which is very good. Rumi and Jawi, it is not actually enforced. It is a cultural thing that happened during the colonial times. We adopted the Romanized, we use Rumi letters to write. But the older generation until today can still use Jawi, the Arabic writing. In fact, my mother used to write good Arabic characters, including calligraphy. So that still remains. However, the loss of meaning, I would say, is a serious one to me. When you read in Jawi and you write in Jawi, the original meanings of the words actually emerge immediately. But when you use Rumi, it may not be so apparent. So I just want to touch and leave it there. So I hope my answer is not perfect, but still at least make some sense to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a fascinating answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Azzman. I think we can move now to the question by Professor Garawi, Rashid Garawi from EPFL, Switzerland.
Thank you, Doctor. It was a very nice presentation and a very intriguing path. I have a question with respect to what you said even earlier before the talk, because you presented Southeast Asia as almost like a monolithic power with the growth of population.
Yes.
And indeed, given that we already listened to the presentation of people from Singapore, there are some similarities. So I'm asking, is there some general agreement and consensus among your countries to go in the same direction, or is it just a coincidence? Thank you very much. I'm dropping my second question because other colleagues want to ask questions. Thank you again for your presentation.
Yes. So, Mr. Garut, thank you very much for the question. In fact, I was actually implying that there was a move in the 1960s. I believe it was our second prime minister, if not the first, who mooted the idea of having a collective will among the Southeast Asian nations, and they call it ASEAN. So the name ASEAN has remained. ASEAN means Association of Southeast Asian Nations. I believe there are now 13 countries or something like that. I can't remember the exact number. But there is a lot of information exchange. It is not as tight as the European Union. It is a fairly loose grouping, but we actually agree on many things. And of course, there are economic exchanges between these countries. So in some ways, the ASEAN countries want to become a common market in some ways. For example, cars produced in certain countries can be sold in other countries. So this actually makes very, very interesting development, and it seems to be continuing quite well. Of course, some countries may be behind, some countries may be ahead, but Asians are very community-based people. We like to share with each other and in a way help each other. So this is a sort of cultural element that has been exploited to good use. Now the situation is that ASEAN has become a very large market which is attracting many other countries. As I mentioned before the talk, the ASEAN market is actually larger than the American market in terms of population size. In terms of economic capacity, of course, it's still very, very far behind, but it's trying to catch up. Now, of course, ASEAN, to look at it from the geopolitical point of view, is straddling between two big countries. One is China, the other is India. So we are in the middle. And to look at history again, all goods coming from the east had to pass through the Straits of Malacca, in others through ASEAN countries. And all goods coming from the west also have to pass through the Straits of Malacca. So this has made the whole region a very big trading group, not just Malacca. Singapore has done very well and many other ports in the region. So this is where I believe the future for ASEAN is just actually to trade more with the rest of the world. Of course, with the COVID crisis, you can see globalization has slowed down a bit. There could be some sort of fragmentation, but the future is still integration. If I may stop there for the time being.
Thank you, Azzman. I think our president has a question. President Ben Musa.
Yes.
Thank you, Si Ahmed. I would like to thank Dr. Azzman for your presentation and for sharing with us your valuable insights. My first question is about how in the case of Malaysia you lead the process of development. We know that we need a shared vision. We need a leadership for mobilizing everyone. We need set up strategies. We need to have feedback laws. We need implementation. We need coherence, and we need also to learn and unlearn. So how this process is led in Malaysia? And my second question is about you tell us about the development engine which must be around innovation capacity and entrepreneurship. What will be the role of the state in this process? How you see the role of the state? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Both are very good questions. And of course, we don't have that much time to answer these questions. Of course, I don't believe I'm an expert in any of these areas, but I'll try my best. Especially the process of development is not as simple to describe. It works actually very well in Malaysia. Until recent times, much of the work of planning is done by the Economic Planning Unit, which was under the Prime Minister's Department. But about a couple of years ago, that EPU has been moved to the Ministry of Economic Affairs, but it remains functioning the same way. So if you speak about what is required for a development planning process, I would say it's actually getting people together. It's similar to what a company would do to actually find out how people think about the future. In other words, we are saying that we need to plan proactively to meet a certain kind of desired state by taking actions from now in order to move all our resources towards that same desired state. That's basically it. And of course, the most important resource are actually the people. So in order to be clear what it means, we have to select people who are able to contribute to the discussion. So for example, I was involved in a couple of meetings, what we call preliminary meetings for the 12th Malaysia Plan. It's actually called simply Interagency Planning Group, IAPG. That's how planning starts in Malaysia, among other things. So the IAPG brings together people in a certain area just to brainstorm ideas. So this is where, if you say ideas, then which ideas will actually bubble up? What bubbles up usually are ideas that come from people with certain kind of knowledge, with certain views that are resonant with the future thinking. In other words, we are talking about certain kinds of thought leaders. So they can make a big impact. So some of the discussion can be very general at the beginning, but when an idea catches on, there'll be further studies done, for example. So this is how actually you tap the entire country's, I would say, intelligence to come up with good ideas of what to put in the plan. When I speak about the thought leaders, they come from everywhere. They can be from the government itself, can be from the private sector, they can be from universities, they can be from the associations of, say, professionals. They can be even NGOs. We are all there in the same room. So we have an argument of what should be important for the next 5 years, maybe 10 years. So these are things that happen all the time. And I'm glad to say that when we do similar work at the Academy of Sciences, we actually follow this same principle. The idea is to ask always the question, what is the development challenge that we are facing together? And if you understand that challenge better, we can offer solutions. And solutions actually are generated, sometimes accepted, sometimes rejected, for many reasons. So it's a very political process. So being able to understand the political process helps us to actually determine how to navigate the system. So if I stop there for the time being, of course, I don't want to go too deeply in it, but the most important part is you have to institutionalize all these processes. It is no good to have the process happening one day and next day, it doesn't work anymore. There must be an institutionalized way of ensuring that these things actually see the light of day. Otherwise, people will lose their interest and lose morale. Can I stop there, Mr. President, for now? I will answer the next question, which is also equally important. Shall I proceed?
Yeah, I think you can go ahead, Dr. Azzman.
Okay. So the next question, as I understand it, when I speak about innovation and entrepreneurship, the President wanted to know what is the role of the state? Very interesting question. In some countries, they say there is no role for the state. And I actually have to say that that is not correct. If you take the example of the internet, who developed the internet? It was at one time called ARPA. And I think many of you know what ARPA is. It's actually now called DARPA. DARPA is Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. of the US government. So ARPANET at that time was meant to protect America if there was a nuclear attack, so that in the event of such a thing happening, Americans could still communicate. In other words, they wanted a system that could not be destroyed by many nuclear bombs. So wasn't that a state decision? All right, so they developed the protocol, TCP/IP. Then they said, okay, it works so well for our purpose. Can we use it for other purposes? Of course, the answer is you will know. Now, internet is the thing. Internet is changing the world. So I just want to give that example to show that actually the state has a very important role to play in promoting innovation and entrepreneurship. It depends on the state of play, or the state of development of each country, where the state should play its most important role. In America, for example, in California especially, you don't need to have venture funds coming from government, because the venture funding industry is very active there. There's a lot of funds, very smart people dealing with it. But in a country like mine, Malaysia, there is a role for government. Of course, government does not take the entire role, but it shares the role with others as well. So let's summarize this way. The role of the government is actually to enable, to facilitate, and sometimes to moderate, sometimes to act as intermediary. Between what? Between the entrepreneurs and their ambitions. How do entrepreneurs take their ideas to market in a way that is very efficient, very productive, and of course, repeatable? This is what the role of the government should be. If I can stop there again, if you wanted to ask further, let me understand a bit more what you're looking at. Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you a lot. Thank you a lot for your answers. Very clear.
Thank you, Dr. Azzman. Then we can move. I still have 3 questions for the moment. So the next one by Mrs. Rita Al-Qadiri. Rita?
Yeah, Don't forget, my friend.
No, you are the next one, I think, on the list, and then Mohammed Fikret.
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Azzman, for this really insightful presentation. So I have 2 questions. My first one is leading a country towards knowledge economy is not an easy task. You know, as you said it, people, the human capital is one of the biggest enablers. So along the way, a few presentation, I was asking myself about some of the key and strategic moves that Malaysia led at the same time on the education front. And I know you have a very strong early childhood policy and program, but what else was invested into the education system to bring the economy to become a knowledge economy? My second question is quite related to the question that Mr. President asked, yet it has a small twist to it. So we saw some amazing charts and diagrams showing some strong contradictions, and my question is simple. If we want to innovate, what area brings the highest value creation and value added to the economy? You showed graphs about Korea, but graphs about Malaysia as well on the same chart, and you seem to have made a bit of a different choices. You're building more on the higher education, research and innovation. Other countries are building on entrepreneurship innovation. So where do you think Morocco should go? And so that's the end of my question. And thank you for your time and for your answers in advance.
Thank you, Dr. Rita Al-Qadiri. Thank you. Both questions are very tough to answer. I will not try to pretend I know much about Morocco to begin with, but I'll base my answers on what I've seen in Malaysia. The first part is how did Malaysia address education? Certainly very important. Just to give some background, I used to look at these numbers many years ago. I've not looked at it for a while. Malaysia used to spend throughout its entire life as a nation more on education than on defense. The biggest budget in our national spending is actually for education. So that has been a very good investment. And you mentioned, of course, early childhood education. I used to work in other countries on projects, and I discovered that surprisingly, I assumed that everybody had good, preschool education, but apparently not. So in Malaysia, almost everybody goes to preschool education. And I know from my friends who are in the field, the highest return from investment is, if you were to divide the stages of education, is actually from preschool. So the kindergarten provides the highest bang for the buck, in other words. Now, having said that, what did we do more? We actually did more than that. Lately, when we discovered that higher education was a major constraint because we didn't have enough public universities, about 20 years ago, we actually privatized higher education. So there are actually more universities that are privatized than there are public ones right now. And we have many foreign students coming to study in Malaysia. So it becomes another business. So these are the things that we have been doing for ourselves, also benefiting other people in the region. So these are things that we do. Now, to say about the quality of education, we are yet not the best. We have been benchmarking ourselves against other countries. We would like to be a lot better. And this is a big debate going on in the country of how we can get better in education. And it boils down to actually how we actually manage the process of education, including how we manage our own teachers, for example. It's not a matter of spending more money. I think we have spent sufficient money. And perhaps for the Morocco's sake, you should look at ways that other countries have produced better results through, I would say, more conscious effort to manage the process of learning. Now, let's move on to the next one. You saw the contradictions in Malaysia, of course. When I compared Malaysia against countries like Taiwan and Korea, and of course you can see Singapore right at the top, but I wouldn't want to compare with Singapore because it's a special case. It's very different kind of country. But for Korea and Taiwan, you can see that they actually made choices that we didn't make. I will say like this. We actually became comfortable with manufacturing from 1970. We had big manufacturing industry now for 50 years that was based on multinationals. At the beginning, they came to Malaysia because we could provide very good infrastructure, as noted by some of our colleagues. At the same time, the cost of labor was very low. So we actually started at the low end, what we call assembly process. Over time, of course, that assembly process has improved. Now we do much higher value added work, but it is still not as owners of products. So I will put it this way, very simply. Malaysia did not make a conscious effort to become a producer. When you are a producer, you actually develop your own technology, you develop your own market, you make your own products, and you market the products and brand them. This is where you gain the highest value added. We decided at that time to actually invest our resources in having more factories that did, I would say, low-level manufacturing. And because we did not own the product, we never had enough, call it experience, in actually using knowledge to produce these products for the world market. So this is the difference. So both Korea and Taiwan actually did this. You can see my first visit to Korea was actually, I think, 1975. I could see at that time that they were a very poor country, but they had produced a car. We did produce a car until 10 years later, maybe. And it was a Hyundai. The car was actually designed by some Italians, and the parts were actually mostly sourced from Japan, but they were so proud that they had this Hyundai Pony, they call it, Hyundai Pony, 1975. But Hyundai and Kia and others have moved on. They have now a completely indigenous car production industry. Of course, you cannot speak again about Korea and without mentioning electronics. I used to visit Korea in the mid-80s. At that time, Samsung was a small company. And in 1985 or 86, maybe, they actually made their first chips. I visited the chip factory that was making memory. And they were heavily investing in that factory with the hope that they could make it a success. Now you can see it is not only successful, it's got products like the mobile phone. So these are things that happen very, very quickly if you make the right choices. And in our case, we actually have not made those choices yet. We continue to remain, I would say a manufacturer, but without owning the product. And therefore, we do not insist on research and development that produce these products which much higher value added. So I hope, Mrs. Rita, we are happy with that answer. Is that enough?
Yes, thank you so much. Very insightful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Azzman. Now we're moving to the question by Mr. Shami, Ahmed Rida Shami. Sorry, Ahmed.
No, that's okay.
You are before, but you have been surpassed by ladies. So.
No, ladies first. You're right, my friend.
I actually asked for my question earlier. Maybe you should check the chat, Ahmed.
You want to take mine again, Rita? My pleasure. Come on.
I have plenty, but go for yours.
Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Azzman, really for very insightful presentation and insightful comments. I have two questions, if you allow me. Please. The first one, you're right. I mean, to say it in other words, having a great vision without implementation capacity is like a dream, you know. So you dream and nothing happens. You wake up in the morning and nothing has happened. So the question is, can you share with us some learnings on successful implementation, in particular in relation with the Pemandu? Pemandu is the delivery units of Malaysia, for my colleagues that don't know Pemandu.
Yes,
so,
yes. Yeah.
So that's the, what works. Is Pemandu focusing on how it works with the different ministries, how it handles project? Really very interesting for us to understand really how, what makes Pemandu successful and what made you successful over the years. The second question has to do with the stakeholders of, change. And we've tried here in Morocco quite, I will say decisively to move things on. But if you don't make all the stakeholders agree at one point in time to move ahead, then you just have to face, how will I say that? You have to face their willingness of not moving ahead. And I'm referring really to unions mainly. So how do you tackle unions in Malaysia? So that's my two questions. Thank you.
Well, these are very interesting questions and difficult to answer. Okay, implementation. Yes, we continue to face implementation challenges. The real problem is actually getting people to understand. And I want to re-emphasize here, when we move to from the industrial model to the knowledge model, it's no longer the same as before. For example, we are used to hierarchy, the pyramid structure in any organization. But when you have to move to a knowledge model, we know already it's actually flatter, if not completely flat. Why is that so? It is because first we have to recognize people who have knowledge. If you don't recognize people who have knowledge, then of course you cannot use what they have. Secondly, the way you organize a group that tries to implement projects is based on expertise. Sometimes we call it subject matter experts. So subject matter experts must somehow be given a role to play, a strong role to play, but they are of course complemented by others who have other kinds of roles and other kinds of expertise. So this is where you have to form teams that are different. So I want to move straight to the idea of how you implement change of this kind. I've gone through several of these processes, and it's not easy. The first thing I would say, I do not know Pemandu much deeply, but I know the way they work is based on the principle of lab. You know, the lab idea? The lab idea is simply to identify the problem. Are you familiar with the lab?
No, sorry.
Okay. It will take time to explain it. But basically, you do not assume from the beginning that you know the problem. Therefore, if you don't know the problem, then you don't know the solution. So you have to get the people to actually understand the problem first. So they go through this process of understanding the problem, and sometimes it takes weeks of labbing to actually produce an understanding of the problem. Okay. It's only after you have identified what the problems are and figure out which are the most important, then you actually run the next lab, what we call, to find the solutions. So these are things done in sequence, sometimes done in parallel, to actually mobilize your own people. Sometimes the same people, when they work with stakeholders that come from outside with an external view, it helps them to think better or what the problems really are. So this sort of labbing, I would say, process helps actually to quickly identify the key issues. And of course, having understood the key issues, we can move on to provide solutions. Then of course, after that, is to, I would say, promote, advocate the solution and get others to actually join in implementation. So there are actually processes that are very well understood by now that you can apply. And I believe if you want to have expertise in this area, we have been doing several exercises in Malaysia that have proven to be quite successful. So I don't see any problem here. It's a fairly standard procedure. Of course, it depends very much on the people you bring in the first place. I often call them movers and shakers. So when I did some work outside of Malaysia one time, I asked them, can you produce me a list of 100 people who are movers and shakers here? So they asked me back, who are movers and shakers? They had difficulty to understand what I meant. Well, basically I said, the people who make things happen in this place.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So the next one, stakeholders. Yeah, again, I think...
Sorry, Doctor.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Just Pemandu works. Put people in the different ministries. Do you have an idea?
I'm not able to hear you very well because there was some noise. Can you repeat, please?
I'm saying Pemandu.
Yeah, Pemandu, yes.
It's a centralized organization, and they put people on implementation of projects in different ministries in a duration, in a period of time. Can you give us some sense about this?
Yes. From what I know, I've never been involved in any Pemandu project. I know the people there, some people there. I know that they do lab work. They also have people who will actually help with implementation. So that's much I know. And if you want to know more, actually Pemandu still exists. It has become a company. So the expertise is still available among some people. Even if you don't go to Pemandu, you can go to other people who have actually used their services and have become quite adept at using the same process.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So can I move on to the stakeholders?
Yes, please.
Yes.
So stakeholders, you're right. You have to deal with key stakeholders. And sometimes the stakeholders have many reasons to be unhappy, including the unions. Actually, to say at least from my point of view, unions have not become very strong in Malaysia. They were strong at one time, but not as strong as now, because what the country has done is to promote actually what they call in-house unions, meaning that there is always engagement between management and workers. So workers get to meet management all the time. So there are fewer, not that there are no problems, there are fewer problems. And you can see what I showed just now, the unemployment rate in Malaysia is fairly low. I think the WF said it was 3%. In fact, most people think that, at least I think, those who do not work, actually, they don't want to work. They are quite happy not to work or to do something on their own. So if you want to work, you can get employment in Malaysia. Now, having said that, what is the situation then? The situation is that when you deal with different kinds of stakeholders, that's why the lab work helps you to understand what they really want. If you engage with them, they will express not what is normally heard, but sometimes what is not heard. And this is where you get into the real problem. And having, I would say, a platform to engage and to understand each other and to come up with a solution that is mutually agreeable, that is the most important thing. So if we will look back on what you are trying to do, which is to have a new kind of development model, I think the most important aspect is to deal with all the stakeholders at the beginning and certainly not at the end. Because a lot of people will actually begin to lose, confidence maybe in themselves, because they realize that actually they cannot continue to thrive in the new kind of economic model unless they are retrained. And some people are not so good at thinking through how should I be retrained. Sometimes we call it upskilling or reskilling. And this is hard for some people. But in the knowledge economy, knowledge society, it is obvious you have to continue to move up. And now you can imagine what happens when robots take over your work, especially in a factory environment. You're no longer required. But what can you do? Well, as you say, you can service the robots, but you have to be trained. So I hope this answer is sufficient for you. Please continue to elaborate.
No, thank you. Just one thing, please. How do you write LEP? L-E-P?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
The approach, the problem-solving approach.
Oh, lab, laboratory, lab, L-A-B, laboratory.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, for the lab process. Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. We have a last question, I think, from Mohammed Fikrat. Say Mohammed Fikrat, the floor is yours.
Me? Did you hear me? It's okay?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes.
Thank you, Ahmed Bonfour, for giving the floor. Thank you, Dr. Azzman, for your excellent presentation. In fact, I have 2.5 questions. I will start with the first question. It's about the role of women. How women are involved in your strategy, generally speaking. The second one is about the research and development experimentation. What's your idea about the good governance for promoting this kind of research and development? And the half question is about the COVID, the pandemic. How you can use your approach based on knowledge to manage that kind of crisis, that kind of pandemic. Thank you very much.
All right, 3 questions. Let me try to deal with one each in turn. The first one, role of women. Actually, in Malaysia, we don't have a problem of having women in top places, none, I would say. There is no problem. For example, I was a vice president of the Academy of Sciences. Our president is still a woman. I just ended my term as vice president. There are many women in the academy. Of course, not as many as we would like to have. I believe it's 80-20 right now. But there are many emerging top professors who are actually women. Of course, in government service, in private sector, you can see them too. On my board, for example, I'm a board member, chairman of a university board. I can remember at least 1, 2, 3 women. 3 women are there. out of, say, 9. So this, and of course, among the top management of the university, we have so many women. So I'm surprised that in some places this trend has not been more prominent. So anyway, what is the involvement of women? Very strong. We have nothing constraining women from joining our events or our deliberations, and we treat all participants equally. Certainly, there could be problems in certain cases where the women may have other duties to perform, and of course we try to accommodate where possible. For example, if they have to look after children, then we find time when they are not as busy to join us for our events. So these are things that need to be managed in a practical way without any sense of, I call it, marginalization among any particular group. So that's to me nothing that special about us. We just practice normal behavior of Malaysia. Number two, this is a very hard question. R&D, the experimental and translational work. By the way, the two terms that are being used, experimental work and translational work, that is to take the results of research to the marketplace. What is a better governance model? This requires a lot of discussion. It's always contextual according to the situation, according to the stage of development. In some countries, this question of basic and applied versus experimental translational work doesn't exist. You can see from the numbers for, say, Korea or for Japan. I used to listen to my Korean friends speaking as early as maybe 20 years ago. At that time, they told me that, oh, our R&D budget now mostly paid for by private sector 20 years ago, or 30 years ago maybe. That was 1990s. And I was asking them, when did the change take place? Because in our country, for example, until today, much of the research expenditure is from public funds. The private sector is not paying for the research. It's at most maybe 50-50. Some people say it's moved to the private sector, but I've not seen the actual numbers. Anyway, in countries like Japan and Korea, for a long time already, most of the funding comes from the private sector. So what does it mean? It means that the private sector already governs it very well. If I'm going to put $1 into a research project, I'm going to make sure I get more than $1 because business is very focused on profits, on making a margin, right? So this is where the governance process for certain countries is already well taken care of. And the latest examples are, say, Korea, Taiwan, and so on. Even China is doing very well now. Now, what happens to those countries that are not able yet to entice the private sector? This is where it is interesting. I just want to reflect on the project that we are doing right now in Malaysia because I happen to be involved in it. We are trying to bring the private sector and researchers together. But we feel that there is a certain level of lack of trust between the two sides. The two sides are speaking different languages. Researchers are speaking the language of research, where maybe publication become more important than money, and the private sector is talking about a process of making money. So the two sides cannot speak well as a group. So we have decided to create a platform where we actually come together in a collaborative way. How do we do that? We say, okay, what if you, private sector people, come together, you create your own plan, and you tell us what you want to do. If I were the intermediary, I would say, okay, I will translate your plan into a couple of research projects, which I will tell my colleagues in the research area. So they will respond to your request for research. So in this way, you actually bring the two sides together so that they can start talking. When there is enough communication with the two sides, then I think there will be greater trust. So this is how I think we have to look at the context of the situation. For some countries, it's no big issue, but for some other countries, it is a big issue. But having said all that, let me say that it is important for the state to allocate some research funding, right? In some countries, again, I want to mention, some people claim, oh, in America, there is no research funding. Actually, that's not true, because I have many friends in America, and one time I had a friend who had to fly back to during his summer vacation. He was doing something here in Malaysia. He had to fly back. Oh, I have to write up a proposal for the DARPA. He spent the entire 3 months over summer to come up with a DARPA proposal. What is DARPA again? It's defense. So this is where governments actually spend money to produce new science and new technology. And many of these technologies now finally come to the marketplace. So that's America's case. But in some other countries, like the European countries, they have actually big government funding. And same with Malaysia, it's actually big government funding. We are simply saying in Malaysia that maybe the funding from government should be reduced. Now you guys, you take over private sector, but that's not happening just yet. Can I stop there, Mr. Muhammad? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Azzman. Now the
the
question, the third one.
Yeah, I didn't answer. Yeah, I didn't answer the COVID-19 question. Well, I don't have a complete answer. You can see that the COVID-19 is producing a lot of interesting changes. Let me just mention, because it happens to be in my area, which is ICT. COVID-19 has shown us, just like what we're doing today, right now, that we can actually interact through electronic means. In the university that I serve, apparently, we moved from almost 0 to 100% online learning within weeks. So that's something that we have learned. Now, can we make it even better? Of course, when we say learning, it can be applied almost to anything. I mentioned earlier, so upskilling and reskilling of workers. This is a huge opportunity for all universities, including your universities in Morocco. Who can be your target market? If you can speak French, your target market are all Francophone countries, including France itself. Why not? You can give training to the Africans who speak French. Of course, if you can speak English too, then you have the whole world with you, French and English together. Maybe a little bit of German. You have the entire world. So this is where one example of how COVID-19 actually has produced a different kind of opportunities and of course capacities to handle certain things very, very well. And it will actually circumvent many of the processes we used to assume was a standard procedure. Another area that I think that we should look at is, of course, e-commerce. E-commerce, for example, you can see from the numbers I showed earlier, was big even in a few years ago in Malaysia. But this year, apparently, it exploded because of the COVID-19 crisis. I'm told that month per month, actually, some companies were getting maybe 10% or what, maybe, sorry, 50% change on month-to-month basis. This is what's happening. In fact, one of the big e-commerce companies had a sale just 2 days ago. It's called an 11/11 sale. And I'm sure they will record many billions of sales just in one day. It's a huge new development. So just two examples. One is learning, the other is e-commerce that have actually emerged out of almost nothing to become major factors in the way we live and how we work. Mr. Muhammad, thank you. Is that all right?
Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent.
I don't know. Thank you, Dr. Azzman. I don't know if there are further questions.
I have dealt with the third question. No, yes.
I'm looking maybe from Facebook. It might be question. I don't know if there are some question from the audience. Now I'm looking to digital team of our commission. In the meantime, I have one small question.
Yes,
in the 90s, you mentioned that science and technology were very key in your trajectory, in the aim of Malaysia to be a developed country by 2020. Could you elaborate more on the role of science and technology in your planning, your activities, and also in terms of implementation, which is, of course, very hard and important topic for us? Thank you.
Yeah. Very good, thank you. That science and technology is the key area of knowledge that needs to be applied. I think is clear to all. Let me just say that all the recent developments you can see, of course, including if you could talk about the COVID-19 crisis, you cannot deal with the crisis unless you have a good science and technology. You have to have good research facilities. You have to have good ways to actually bring from the lab from experimental to translational work to produce actual products. Then you have to test the product. Then you have to market the product, make them and market them. So all these things require a huge amount of expertise. So we call it science and technology. But behind it actually is a whole culture of building a kind of knowledge that has, I would say, almost immediate use. So by saying this, we are not saying that the other kinds of knowledge are not important. And I think this is where now we have to do a proper balance. Other kinds of knowledge become important because they provide the context. If you say you want to produce a vaccine, what is the context? The context is, of course, does it help most of the people? Does it produce any harmful effect? Will it protect a person from repeated attacks by the mutations of the same virus? All these are questions that are not merely scientific, but have, I would say, social and cultural and maybe even civilizational implications. So when we speak about how we should have to deal with science and technology, it is always in context. The context is science and technology have to do with knowing how, isn't it? Yeah. But sometimes we say we also have to know why. So knowing why is actually the bigger kind of knowledge. So this is I think the greater need now, because of all the crises happening around us, for us to have a more balanced view about knowledge. But let's just focus on science and technology for now. How do we actually manage this? It is key to our future development. Now the question is always, what is actually science and technology? Some of the science and technologies we speak about, sciences and technologies we speak about actually are protected. And this is where I feel there needs to be a bigger understanding of actually why should certain things be protected and others are not protected. So these are things that I think need further discussion. But even if it is protected, we have to use certain technologies because it is useful. So there are ways of licensing, for example, or getting some collaborative work done, as you see even among the COVID vaccines that's being promoted by the World Health Organization. So there are ways of dealing with this sort of thing. Anyway, back to the question of how we see it here in Malaysia. We see SNT as the key to unlock I would say, innate value that we already have. We have a lot of creative value in among our communities, yet we are not able to unlock that value. How do we do it? We have to apply science and technology, and of course work with industry and with entrepreneurs that can turn these ideas, these basic raw ideas, into things or services that are desired by the users out there. So perhaps if I may stop there, if you can elaborate on your other aspects of the question, I can try to respond, Azzman.
I think for me, thank you very much. I think for me, the answer is very clear. And by the way, we're coming somehow at the end of our conversation. I don't know if there is further comment from the Commission members or from Facebook. I was looking to Ihsan. Maybe there are some comments from Facebook for our guest.
We haven't seen any so far.
Any comment? Okay, yeah. Okay. But I think we can now conclude our conversation. Unfortunately, our president, Mr. Musa, he has to leave for another commitment. So on behalf of him, I would like to excuse his presence at the end of our meeting. And also on behalf of my colleague from the Commission, I would like to thank you warmly for this very stimulating and very open, by the way, discussion. And we really appreciate the openness of your mind, the way you elaborate your argument. And also, as you know, Morocco is at the west and you are at the east. with
Yes.
similar size. There is certainly with different contexts, geographical contexts. You are in Asia, Morocco is in between Africa and Europe. So these two very unique geographical and somehow cultural positioning are, I found them very unique, and they certainly opened the way, the agenda for a sort of not benchmarking, but bench learning, which means that Moroccan decision makers and people can learn from you and vice versa. And as you mentioned it in your expose, the way you progress collectively by defining collectively the issue and defining also collectively the
Yes, yes.
solution. So thank you very much, Dr. Azzman, and I give you the final words maybe for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I can just join you to say that let's have the Maghrib, the Mashriq come together to become the movers and shakers of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Azzman. Thank you, thank you, colleagues, and thank you for your time and your availability. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Very well done. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you a lot, Dr. Azzman. Thank you, Ahmed. Bravo. Bravo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. بارك الله على السي احمد. برافو.
الله يعينكم.
ميرسي. الله يحفظك.
À bientôt.
الله يحفظك.